Hello, everyone. It's Joan Shiels. If you come to this message without having listened to the reading, please go back and let yourself hear the poem that I chose called Good Bones. It's such a wonderful poem. I wanted to do it ultra justice, so I asked Alan Kapishke to read it, and he is powerful and it's powerful. So please make sure you've seen that before we begin. So, to begin, the poet says that the world is 50% terrible. Despite the overwhelming evidence, I have managed to push that information aside for most of my life, but I am sad to admit that this year I have had to accept that it is true. The national death toll is heartbreaking. The global death toll is equally horrible. Wildfires engulfed the Western US this year. The presidential election was shocking. The presidential post-election season was disgusting. The sick and the hurting are everywhere. And I admit that prior to this year, I sometimes had a hard time understanding just how ordinary people followed Hitler. And with great sadness, I admit that this year I've come to understand that. But enough of the horribles. I'm not going to parade them anymore. You all know the situation. But now it's the winter solstice. Today, Mother Nature tells us that it is the beginning of the end of this year of rancor and fear and disturbing change and illness and isolation. And tonight, we can expect light to come back, that it's on its way. Now, this solstice is a very old and very universal celebration. Pagans celebrated it, they tell us, at Stonehenge 5,000 years ago. The ancient Romans celebrated it with Saturnalia, debauched perhaps, but a celebration of the winter solstice nonetheless. Throughout time and culture, humans have reached out on this longest night in the knowledge that change is coming. The Chinese celebration of the winter solstice, called Dongzi, is one of the most important Chinese and East Asian celebrations of the year. Because from this point forward, the negative yin qualities of darkness have to give way to the more positive yang qualities of light and of warmth. Zoroastrianism, which some of you might not even have heard the word, but Zoroastrianism was one of the most powerful and widespread religions in the world for 1,000 years. Their Yalda night has been the Iranian solstice festival since the 2nd century. It is a time to see that people feel protected from the evil spirits that come out on these long nights. I mean, Iranians all over the world celebrate the triumph of the all-powerful sun god Mithra, and they burn fires to light their way through the darkness. The ancient Norsemen of Scandinavia celebrated the solstice when fathers and sons would go get the biggest log they could find and cut it into a stump and light it on one end to let it burn as long as a stump of a tree can burn. Of course, this has become known as our Yule log. In Japan, the winter solstice is a particularly sacred time of year, especially, of course, for farmers who welcome the return of the sun. And they mark it with huge bonfires on Mount Fuji. And symbolically, these fires banish evil and announce the arrival of goodness. For the Zuni, one of the North American Pueblo tribes in New Mexico, the winter solstice was one of great singing and celebration and dancing led by the 12 Kachina clowns. The vast Inca Empire paid homage to the sun god Inti at a winter solstice celebration called Raimi, which translates to Sun Festival. Of course, in Peru, like in the rest of the Southern Hemisphere, the winter solstice comes in June. Now, all of these celebrations of the winter solstice predate the birth of Christ and the celebration of Christmas. Many believe that the Christian church felt that by assimilating one of their major holidays into the solstice holiday would be a way of persuading those who followed the old ways to come into this new faith. Because of course there's no record anywhere of Jesus's birth, not when or how or who was there or anything. These are all fictions in only 2 of the 4 Gospels, and they don't even match. But what a wonderful celebration. The birth of a child. What is more promising, more wonderful, more life-affirming than the birth of a child? And of course, that child turns out to be no ordinary child, but a man who would teach peace and compassion and justice and love and all the forms of emotion and action that banish the darkness of the human heart. The myths and the rituals and the practices of the solstice have long provided a reason for people to look beyond the destructive forces of ordinary life. Because destructive forces in ordinary life are there, are they not? They've never seemed so close as they are this year, to me anyway, perhaps to us. The world is 50% terrible, though I keep this from my children too. In times of chaos and vulgarity, this winter rite deepens our consciousness and invites us to remember what is eternal, what really matters. In these dark times, this is our medicine. This is our antidote. This is our wall against despair. And I suggest that we make it a personal challenge this year. Look around. We've got a fixer-upper on our hands. And what are we going to do? What am I going to do about it? And what are you going to do about it? Because big or small, each of us has something we can do. Community-wide, home-wide, personal-wide. It can be almost anything as long as it promotes goodness and kindness and encourages the light to become bigger. We can create order out of chaos and bring joy into despair with our own actions. I love these words from William James, the great American psychologist and philosopher. He said, "I am done with great things and big things, with great institutions and big success. And I am for those tiny, invisible, molecular moral forces that work from individual to individual through the centuries, through the crannies of the world, like so many rootlets oozing water, which, if you give them time, will wear away the hardest monuments of man's pride." And I hold close the words of Robert Pirsig in his astonishing book from the 70s, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And one of my favorite passages from my favorite book is, I think that if we're going to reform the world and make it a better place to live in, the way to do it is not to talk about relationships of a political nature, which are inevitably full of programs, full of things for other people to do. The place to improve the world is first in one own heart and head and hands, and then to work outward from there. Other people talk about how to expand the destiny of mankind, and they should. I just want to talk about what I can do. I love that we celebrate the solstice here at UU. It's always up to the speaker to decide just which part of these winter celebrations we want to concentrate on. As I looked at the music that Carol Soper chose, it was all Christmas music. And I know that that's important. That's an important celebration for many of you, religious or not, secular or not. But the Christmas celebration is here and all this music. But I love the solstice. I think it's a perfect holiday. It's not, oh, excuse me, get more comfortable. It's not infused with gift giving or any kind of enforced celebrations. It's just a day that's ripe with opportunity for rebirth and reflection and renewal. And I know that all this is a little hard to buy when the world is so full of crazy people. And there's so much suffering on the world stage right now. I myself have been feeling a little, well, I'll use a psychiatric term, cuckoo. But I believe that you can only see the stars when it's dark. And the darker that it is, the brighter the light that breaks through. So let's make the light. Let's be the ones to refresh and renew in this natural turning season. And let's start that renewal right now. Things have been a mess this year, discouraging, disenchanting. But I'm going to go back to the poet now. This place could be beautiful. We could make it beautiful. I have these closing words for you. This is a poem I love from Sheena Pugh called Sometimes. Sometimes things don't go, after all, from bad to worse. Some years grapes face down frost, green thrives, the crops don't fail, and sometimes the woman aims high and all goes well. A people sometimes will step back from war, elect an honest person, decide that they care enough, they can't leave some stranger poor. And some men become what they were born for. Sometimes our best intentions do not go amiss. Sometimes we do as we meant to do. The sun will sometimes melt a field of sorrow that seemed hard frozen. May it happen for you. Peace be with you.